My home is worth what? Yes, and I'm sorry, we're not done yet. Home prices still have further to fall. Don't you think it's time you understood the why behind what's going on? Hi, my name is Lynn Rogers, and I'm with the Financial Revival Group. Our company was founded in March of 2010 specifically to educate and empower underwater homeowners like you. One of the biggest decisions you'll ever make is going to be what you do or don't do about the fact that you've lost all the equity in your property. You may have found this webinar while reading our ebook of the same title, but the information you're going to get right now is completely different than the 9 options you learned about in our book. During this short online class, you're going to learn about the basic economic reasons why your home value won't be coming back anytime soon. With the knowledge you get in the next few minutes, you'll be in a much better place to make an informed decision about your home, not an emotional one. So what happened? I'm sure you've heard the term housing bubble in the past few years, but what does that really mean? Don't house prices, like the stock market, just cycle? Aren't we just in a regular market cycle? Well, yes, they do, but what we're in right now is not a market cycle. Let's take a look at what happened. Did you know that from 2001 to 2006, income adjusted for inflation was only up 2%, but housing prices were up 80%? That's a classic symptom of a bubble, not a cycle. Houses were being driven up artificially, not by people's ability to actually afford them. There's actually 6 bubbles in the American economy that created that awesome feeling of wealth we all had. There's the real estate bubble, discretionary spending, the stock market, the credit market, the U.S. dollar, and the government debt and spending bubble. None of these bubbles could have risen as high or as fast as they did without the others pulling them up. Each bubble was leveraging the other ones to make it appear that we had wealth, when in fact, without things like real wage increases, real productivity, it was more like monopoly money. So what do the bubbles look like today? The real estate bubble was the first one to start deflating. Although most Americans think we didn't really hit the crisis mode in 2008, the first inklings started showing up in 05 and 06 when home values stopped skyrocketing, and by 07, mortgage lending hit the wall. Discretionary spending, the credit market, and the stock market followed in 2008, and now what we're left with is 4 partially imploded bubbles and 2 ever-expanding ones that are getting bigger and bigger that will eventually pop. Okay, well, so the real estate bubble popped. We keep hearing that housing prices are at or near the bottom, right? Couldn't they start to rise again now since they're so low? Well, of course they could if we just reinflated the bubble, right? Let's just reinflate that sucker. Unfortunately, we can't do that this time because people simply can't afford higher home prices. Even with interest rates at historical lows, the home purchase market is terrible right now. There are millions of homes just sitting, waiting to be sold. If the underlying economic fundamentals of a healthy economy were there, prices would just naturally rise, but that's not the case. The unemployment rate is butting up against Great Depression levels. People that don't have jobs can't and won't buy a new home. It's pretty simple. So actually, not only are home prices not going back up, they are nowhere near the bottom, and the job situation is one of the big reasons. Take a look at this chart. We've basically lost all of the jobs that were created during the housing boom. And to get the jobs to population back to the same that it was in 2000 would require another 18 million jobs today. That's because obviously over the last decade, our population has gone up. So we've got more people today competing for the same number of jobs. Real unemployment is not the 9.1% number the government wants you to believe. It's somewhere in the 16 to 20% range when you factor in the people that have taken part-time jobs because they can't find full-time work, and the people that have fallen off the unemployment roll because they've been on it for so long, and the people that have simply given up looking for work. During the Great Depression, the unemployment rate was 21%. We are dangerously close to that now. The other almost unspoken problem is that nothing has been done to address the huge problem of negative equity, estimated at 22.5% of all homes. Negative equity is when someone owes more on their mortgage than their home is worth. 3 out of 4 people in this situation have mortgages at higher than market interest rates because they can't get out of them. So we keep hearing that if we could just get jobs going, the home values would start going back up. That's certainly part of the equation. But if those people that get those new jobs still can't refinance or sell their homes because they can't afford to bring tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands to the table to close on their sale, they are stuck. Interest rates on mortgages could be 0% right now, and that would still do nothing to erase individual homeowners' negative equity. We've seen over $10 trillion in home equity evaporate since June of 2006. That's an average of a 30% drop in the price of your home. The cheerleaders keep saying that we're bottoming out or close to bottoming out. By the way, have you noticed that that carrot just keeps moving out to the next year? First we were going to bottom out in 2009, then it was 2010, then 2011. Now it's either later this year or probably in 2012. Well, after they predict, we'll see, right? They keep moving that carrot forward. And then they say we might be flat for next year, but then rates are going to start back up. Okay, so far we've looked at high unemployment and the huge amount of negative equity as 2 reasons why home values won't be shooting back up anytime soon. What about the simple principle of supply and demand? Have you heard of shadow inventory? These are homes that are in the process of being foreclosed on or have already been foreclosed on and have not been relisted for sale yet. The dark blue portion of this graph here are homes that are at least 12 months behind on their mortgage payment but have not officially gone through foreclosure. The lighter blue are homes that have gone back to the banks. Now, the recession ended in mid-2009, right? That's what they say. Just look at the increase in shadow inventory since then. Remember, this chart does not include anyone less than 1 year behind on their mortgage. So all of the people that are 90 days late or 120 days late, in other words, all the homes headed towards foreclosure aren't even included in this chart. And we've got almost 3.5 million in this chart. So today we've got about 4 million homes are typically on the market. We've got another 3.4 that are considered shadow inventory, and there's another about 4.3 million that are late on their mortgage payment. We also have somewhere between 11 and 16 million homes that are underwater, and another 2.6 million that have less than 5% equity, meaning they'll be underwater soon as values are continuing to drop. We believe we're looking at least another 10 million households defaulting on their mortgages in the next few years. That's considerably more than have defaulted even up to now. So how is it possible that your home value could start back up in the next year or two? So knowing what you know now, do you really think we're at the bottom? From the day we opened our doors in March of 2010, the Financial Revival Group has projected that housing prices wouldn't finish dropping until 2014 at the earliest. Then we believe that prices will stay flat for several years, not just for a year or two, before starting to very slowly head back up. So let's look at what the next 5 years could bring. We're going to use a home that was purchased for $300,000 in 2007 with no money down. Assuming a regular amortization schedule on a 30-year fix, you can see that by 2016, regardless of whether you believe us or the cheerleaders, you're still underwater on that mortgage. What if we're just half right? When the media and the experts talk about home values, what they don't include are the costs to sell your home. And those are real costs, so they must be considered when you're calculating what your equity position is. On average, nationally, costs to sell are about 10%. You've got a real estate commission of about 6%. Forget about trying to sell your home by owner in this market. You're just going to need to have a realtor help you. As a seller, you're going to have closing costs, and right now you'll be expected to pay the buyer's closing costs too. So whatever you think your equity is or not, go ahead and subtract another 10%. So now where are you on that graph? We've talked in depth about the real estate market, but don't forget that the housing problem is interrelated with the other bubbles that held up the economy until just a few years ago. Let's take a quick look at the other three that have partially deflated. The stock market was similar to the housing market. The Dow rose 1,400% from 1982 to 2007, but company earnings only rose 300% in that same period, and the GDP, the measure of our real economic growth, grew less than that. So just like housing, the stock market was artificially propped up. That means bubble. The credit bubble has deflated the least of the four. You can't really claim we have a credit crisis when interest rates are at 60-year lows. But the problem is when the credit market locked up, the bad loans started to go. And because of the loss of home equity, unemployment, and other things happening, the second phase is starting to happen when good loans are going bad. Just wait until interest rates actually head up and we actually have a credit crisis. We're going to see this bubble continue to pop. Discretionary spending. In 2009, MetLife did a study that showed over 50% of American households can't cover their monthly expenses for more than 2 months if an income earner in the family loses their job. A good portion of our expenses are discretionary, folks. They can be quickly cut during tough times, which is going to cause more job cuts because when people aren't spending, the jobs that are dependent on people spending will get cut, and so on and so on. Here goes another bubble. Our economy is so dependent on consumer spending that it will be impossible to go back to its previous high without it. Now, admittedly, if the Federal Reserve and the government had not intervened with TARP, QE1, QE2, etc., the first four bubbles would have fallen much farther. And they're still at it right now with the new Operation Twist that was recently announced. But all of this stimulus, it's only stalled the fall. It has not stopped it. And when the last two bubbles pop, that U.S. dollar bubble and the government debt and spending bubble, the other four will finally completely deflate, and the landing is going to be much harder than if there had been no stimulus at all. Why is that? Well, because the majority of the money spent to try and prop up the economy, aka the other four bubbles, has inflated the last two bubbles to levels that popping is simply unavoidable. The real uptick in our national debt happened after 9/11 when the government and the Federal Reserve worked to get the economy going. Even when things were going great in the mid-2000s, they didn't cut back and then went into absolute turbocharge starting with the bank bailouts in late 2008. Notice that at the same time, our tax revenues are actually declining. That's because we now have millions and millions of people out of work. So tax revenues that could help pay down the debt are going down and are nowhere near keeping up with the amount of debt. Actually, the almost 15 trillion government debt is also almost the tip of the iceberg. Let's take a look at a recent snapshot of the debt clock. So here we've got the national debt. Here, this is a couple weeks old, so it's higher now. But what we've also got down here are unfunded liabilities. We've got things that, like Social Security, where the government's used the money and has not paid it back. We've got prescription drugs, Medicare. The total U.S. unfunded liabilities are over $115 trillion. That's over $1 million per taxpayer. So what does $1 trillion look like? We keep throwing these numbers down. Almost 15 trillion in national debt, over 115 trillion in unfunded liabilities. It's such a huge, crazy, scary number. It's hard for us to even put our arms around it. So let's give it a try. Here we've got a $100 bill. We're going to take 100 hundreds and put them in a stack, and now you've got 10,000. You've got bundles of $10,000 is what we'll be working with. So here's our average man standing there, and he's standing next to a bundle of what $1 million would look like in comparison to his height. All right, now we're at 100 million. Here's a billion. All of these are $10,000 bundles in here, just like we started with at the beginning. And here's a trillion. Here's our man. That's a trillion. And we owe more than 125 of these bundles. It's just unbelievable. It really is. So what is the current repayment plan for the national debt? Well, there isn't one. It's just too big. We're not going to be able to pay it back. Frankly, we don't think it matters who's in office. This is a train that we are not going to be able to stop. You know, an increase in real productivity could get us out of this, but we haven't seen any real improvements in productivity in this country for 30 years. Our productivity has been shipped overseas, and it's going to take time and money to bring it back. We can't all of a sudden have manufacturing plants upgraded and expanded and opened here by next week. To assume that we can do that quickly in order to prevent the government debt bubble from popping is unrealistic. So why doesn't the government just keep raising the debt ceiling and borrow more money? Well, do you have an unlimited credit line on your credit cards? I certainly don't. At some point, the people who buy our debt are going to say enough. Our top 4 investors are China, England, Japan, and now, in the last few years, our own Federal Reserve. The Fed can and most likely will continue to print money to try to keep things afloat. But when the foreign investors lose their appetite for our money, our credit limit will be reached. So when are they going to lose their appetite? Well, the 14+ trillion we owe right now is basically a bad loan. We've never made any significant progress in paying it down. At some point, they're going to realize that we will never pay it back because we can't. Plus, they're going to have their own issues at home. We've seen that already with Europe, and now there's talk that China's starting to slow down. The Fed will either try to inflate the debt away, meaning they're going to print lots and lots of more money, or the U.S. government will default. Either way, it's bad news for you and for me. If they inflate it away, the Fed would have to print so much money that the amount owed becomes insignificant. For you and me, that means prices on all of our goods, especially imported goods, will skyrocket. So the government debt could, in essence, be wiped out this way. But the standard of living for the rest of us will be crushed. But the flip side is also, if inflation takes interest rates to 20% or even 10%, how will the government afford the interest on the loans that keep coming due? They won't be able to pay it, which means we think we'll ultimately end up in a default anyway. We've created a negative feedback loop. The Fed prints money in an attempt to keep the economy going, which causes our debt to go higher and higher, which at some point will make our foreign investors nervous enough that they're going to stop or even just slow down the amount that they're going to be willing to invest in our debt, which is, by the way, our bond market. This is going to cause some of our debt to come due in full because we won't be able to refinance it. So the Fed will print more and more money trying to keep us from defaulting, which will ultimately result in very high inflation and the popping of the U.S. dollar bubble. Just look at what's happened to the supply of money since TARP and the stimulus program began. It's insane. Here is our money supply back in 08 and 09. Look at it now. It's just unbelievable how much money's been pumped into this economy. And the problem is, without a healthy economy, we don't have the ability to sop up all of this extra money that's been and is going to be printed, or the means to hold on while it's pulled out of the system. The only result is inflation, which is going to drive the value of the dollar lower and lower and lower. Think that that can't happen here in the good old United States of America? Well, It already has during the Civil War. Try using those Confederate dollars at the grocery store. All bubbles pop. That's why they're bubbles instead of cycles. And as the government debt and dollar bubbles burst, interest rates will go very high through inflation. Unemployment will go higher as businesses are forced to cut costs because things cost too much money because of interest rates being higher, which means the discretionary spending will basically disappear and home prices will plunge. Are you starting to understand that the deck is stacked against us? Okay, the purpose of this class is not to put you into a state of despair. As I said at the beginning, the purpose is to help you get informed with real information and to empower you to start taking steps to protect yourself. What do you think about the American dream? Is it dead? We've got 25 million Americans that are unemployed or underemployed. We've got just somewhere between 11 and 16 million homes that own more on their mortgage than they're worth. And right now, the U.S. is ranked number 10 in upward mobility. 10th. Upward mobility and the American dream is what we're all about. It's what we've been brought up to believe in. If we've lost it, how do we get it back? Big ideas and moves are happening today. They're just not happening in Washington, D.C., or on Wall Street, or in the big banks. They're happening at the community, neighborhood, family, and individual level. The people that will get through this intact, and dare we say ahead, are the ones that take a stand, get educated, stay educated, and have an actual plan to work. This isn't about throwing in the towel. It's about Plan B. Do you have one? Part of that plan must include coming up with a strategy around your upside-down mortgage. In the past few years, we've seen 5 basic mistakes that underwater homeowners tend to make. Number 1, they trust that their bank's going to help them. Now, in order to get the bank to talk to you, you have to turn over all of your financial information. This is like giving your playbook to the opposing coach. Excuse me. The banks have unanimously proven that they are in this for themselves. They are not interested in helping homeowners unless it means a profit or less of a loss for them. Number 2, the underwater homeowners believe the government will help them. Every one of the government programs developed to get us back on track has failed miserably. Trillions of dollars have been printed and spent with the result of unemployment being higher than 2008, real wages are down, and home values continue to fall. We just don't believe that they can come up with a solve. They're going to be more concerned about the debt going forward than with helping individual families. Number 3, they believe this will all blow over and it'll all be okay. Hopefully we've helped you to see that this is simply not going to happen. Number 4, they don't do their homework to get the whole story. They just believe what the politicians and the media are telling us. Congratulations. By attending this class, you're on your way to knowing more about what's really going on than the vast majority of the people in this country. And last but not least, they don't do anything. They just stick their heads in the sand and life just happened to them. If you've read our ebook, you know that as an underwater homeowner, you actually have 9 options to choose from. So you're not boxed in with no way out. Yes, some of these options are different than the ones that we ever thought we'd need, but they are still options. It may make sense for you to give your home back to the bank. You don't have to let them take it. You can decide to give it back. It's within your rights to do so. And if you do so with a deliberate plan, you can gain a huge financial advantage. So how do you get the answers for your particular situation? Great news! You can sign up for a free 15-minute phone consultation with one of the country's leading experts in the housing crisis at the Financial Revival Group. You will talk to someone that will listen to your unique situation. You're going to get immediate answers for your property-related questions. We're going to ease your fears. There are ways to fix this. This can be your first step in formulating your own plan. This meeting is 100% confidential to protect your privacy. It is so important for you to realize that you are not limited to doing just what the banks tell you to do. Another option, if you already know that you need to do something, then consider signing up for our one-on-one strategy session. In 90 minutes, you'll be well on your way to sleeping better and having money in your pocket again. Come see what the other side looks like for you. Our 90-minute one-on-one strategy session has a regular retail price of $295. For our on-class viewers, we've cut that cost to $195. This is a live, face-to-face session done via webcam where you'll be able to discuss in depth your personal situation. During your session, we go into detail about the value of your property and where you actually stand, your income and expenses, your level of consumer debt, your goals and expectations for the future, what triggering events are coming your way in the next 10 years that you could need money for, things like college tuition, retirement, where you want to go, and which of the 9 options will get you there. You can register for the free 15-minute consultation or our one-on-one strategy session right on this webpage. Again, congratulations on taking the time to attend this class. Believe it or not, with all the bad news we've delivered here, those of us at the Financial Revival Group really do see ways for families to get ahead during these uncertain times. That's because we wholeheartedly believe that whenever a door is closed, a window of good fortune opens for those who are looking for it. Americans need a beacon of hope in today's housing market. We're here to stand up for you and guide you through all the possibilities to make you whole again. We help create brighter futures for underwater homeowners so you can experience the freedom of a richer life that is just on the other side. We thank you for your time and look forward to hearing from you soon.